Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on 21stCenturyWire.com, the alternate current radio network, as well as streaming out live on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Facebook Live, and a number of other platforms are also on the audio streams after the program. If you subscribe to any of those, they'll be uploaded soon after on iTunes, Spotify, and a number of the top audio streaming platforms. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 549 of this weekly Omnibus News and Analysis radio program. We got a special segment just to kick things off. We're going to bring on a special guest to talk about the important developing situation, the crisis, potential civil war, in fact, in Syria, the imminent breakup of Syria, potentially. Very important conversation. We're going to bring our guest, very special guest, on to talk about that shortly. And then afterwards, we're going to go into overdrive, and we'll be joined by a couple of our team members at Alternate Current Radio Network. Hesher, aka Brian McLean, also Basil Valentine may join us as well in the overdrive segment. A lot of news to cover, a lot of domestic U.S. news as well. We'll be sure to hit that. But I want to bring on our guest right now, and we'll bring him up on stage. He's joining us on the live link. And I want to welcome on to the program Karim Franceschi. Karim, thank you very much for joining us this week on the Sunday Wire.
Thank you for inviting me, Patrick.
Thank you. And just a little introduction. Karim is born in Casablanca, Morocco. His father's Italian, his mother's Moroccan, and he basically got introduced to the Syrian story, Karim, when you went to Kobani in 2014 on a humanitarian mission. And based on what you saw there, it seems like you decided to stay and really join the fight to defend that city, to defend the Kurdish community, as well as the broader community against the emergence of ISIS. And this has been recounted in your books as well. If you go to Karim's social media, we'll bring his account up on screen briefly in a few minutes or later on in the segment. But that's part of your experience there. Of course, you've been back to Syria since as well. And the fall of Raqqa, you've had firsthand experience there. So you've got a really unique, I think, perspective, Karim, about what's going on in the country. But I want to hand it over to you. Hopefully I got your bio correct there. But it's, looking back at all that's happened to that country from 2011, the so-called Arab Spring, all of the different trials and tribulations of Syria, all the fighting, the balkanization of the country, and then look what happened in December. It was something that a lot of people did not expect to happen, and so suddenly. And I personally, myself, I've been to Syria during the war in 2017, and it's, to me, horrifying what's happened to this country. So we have a lot to talk about there, but I'm going to hand it over to you. Anything else you want to tell me about, or tell our audience about, your experience with Syria, and then we'll get into the discussion about where things are now under the new regime. But go ahead, Karim.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, what is there to add? I've been a commander in between 2016 and 2017. I helped set up the international YPG battalion, which hosted foreign volunteers, internationalists. That's how I like to call them. And they came from all over Europe, all over the world, and we had a significant contribution during the campaign to liberate Raqqa. So all that advance from Kobani to the liberation of what at that time was the capital of the Islamic State. In the years I've been there as an Arab Moroccan, Amazigh, I have no relation to the Kurdish cause in terms of bloodlines. My parents are not Kurdish. And when I went there as a Marxist activist, and I had no real relation to the Kurdish cause up to that point. And then I decided, to make the jump, so to speak, and join the resistance in a city under siege. My Italian comrades were telling me I was a fool back then, and also the Kurdish comrades were across the border in Turkey told me the same. But in that time, I rose through the ranks of the YPG. I learned Kurdish fluently. I learned the Arabic, the type of Arabic that is spoken, Shami, that is spoken in that region. Moroccans speak Darija, and they would not understand a word you say when you're there. So I was always an outsider, somehow, until the liberation of Raqqa, until I had not only the international battalion under my command, but I had like 300 to 500 men, which were Arabs in the southern front of Raqqa, and they were all under my command. And I could relate to them very well because I speak their same language, I understand the culture. So I was never, and that's what I wanted to precise, I was never Lawrence of Arabia. I was never the Western savior, the white man going there to teach the brown man how to fight. I was always, as an Italian, half Moroccan, as a Moroccan, half Italian. So I walked among them, but I wasn't one of them. That's my point.
Yeah, we've got some pictures. Actually, we'll bring this up on screen, some images from your time there. Will show us here. What's this? Presumably is a tank that was commandeered by ISIS, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was a tank that was airstriked by the coalition. And it's funny, that picture was published by the Turkish press. They called me Italian terrorist, join the Kurds in the siege of Kobani, because Turkey at that time was cheering for ISIS to finish off the Kurdish resistance, which has been a thorn in Turkey's side for a long time, as you know.
Yeah, so I would imagine this is a tank stolen from the Iraqi arsenal and then brought across the border. Is that right?
Yeah, or maybe even from Assad. Because the things that they have taken from the Iraqi arsenal, we're talking about Abrahams. Yeah, we're not talking about T-72s or T-76. We're talking about Abrahams. We're talking about American equipment. And they brought that also to Kobani for sure. That before the American intervention, if you look at the images, because there was a big hill on the Turkish side, and they were filming the siege while it was happening. And even before American intervention, you would think airstrikes were taking place, because ISIS brought so much equipment from Mosul, and they were using tanks and artillery so heavily that it looks like airstrikes. The city wasn't destroyed by the Americans; was already destroyed by ISIS during the siege.
So this is Raqqa.
This is Kobani.
Oh, this is Kobani after the siege of Kobani. Okay, and that's you there holding what looks like a Kalashnikov.
An AK-47, yeah.
An AK-47. Okay, there's the classic firearm, and then you're wearing ghillie suits here. So I assume sniper duty here.
Yeah, like in the 3 months I was in the siege, the first month I lost 5 times my team. Like my team was completely butchered, and I had to be moved to a new team, and new teams kept getting formed until I was selected to join the sniper unit, which was one platoon led by, I don't know if you remember him, Musa the sniper. He's a Kurd whose picture has become very notorious because it's a picture of him, and under him the ruins of Kobani, and he's holding a sniper rifle. And I was basically his pupil for a month, and that's me with a Mosin Nagant, with a scope, which is the PSO-1 scope, the scopes that usually go on a Dragunov, on an SVD. And like I was just improvising, and that's the only rifle that was left for me. So it wasn't ideal, really. I prefer to have something more light, but it did the job.
And I remember having a conversation with a member of the Syrian Arab Army when I was in Syria, and They were talking about their facing off against ISIS fighters, and they said that these were the best trained soldiers that they had ever encountered, that they had been, it appeared like they were trained to NATO standard. The level, they're well equipped. These weren't ragtag fighters by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe this was early on. I'm sure that the ranks changed over the years. But was that your experience as well? Was there the quite powerful fighting force?
Absolutely, yeah, I can attest to that. We found a Arab sniper, and he had a booklet written in perfect English, perfect, like academic level, and he had all the calculations done in it, and they were like not only NATO standards, they were like American standards, because you have to understand, he was from Saudi Arabia. We could tell because he had his passport on him. But here's the thing. The calculation were done in mills, and only the U.S. Army trains that way. Like if you go anywhere else in the world, they don't train in mills. They have other ways to calculate distances. They don't do miles. It makes no sense for us to do miles. We do kilometers, meters. So that guy had for sure some kind of very advanced military training from a U.S. entity. There is no way around that.
Yeah, we'll bring that back up on screen here, and just this. So this is the international brigade. These are the international.
That's the core assault group. I'm on the right. I had an M16 with a thermal sight on it, and in front, going from right to left, you have a British ex-army veteran. He has had some deployments in Afghanistan. Then the one sitting with RPG was just a political volunteer, ideological, from Spain. Then you have an American with the rockets in his back, no prior military experience, but the core commanders of my battalion were the two sitting next to him. So the one in front, from Finland, Finnish officer, he had you can't see it, but he has a night vision scope on his rifle that we took from ISIS, very advanced. And again, another one from Finland, also a Finnish officer, and then one Germany and England. The one from Germany, which is the almost last, the second from the right, he has died. He has been killed by a Turkish airstrike. When Turkey later on launched the incursion inside Syria to take Ras Al Ain, the Kurds call it Surakani, and he tried to defend that city. And a lot of more than you think, more foreign volunteers than you would think have been killed by Turkish airstrikes. And of course, there was never any complaints from the coalition.
We'll bring the map of Syria up here on screen, and we're talking mainly, I think, your experience being the northeastern quadrant of the country. So you can see Al-Raqqa, a province in the middle, and then Al-Hakasa and Al-Qamishli, and so you have experience in a lot of these areas, I gather, and we'll get to the configurations. We'll talk about the present day Syria, but I think it's important that people understand the role and the position of the Kurdish forces in Syria. And just to finish off those images that you provided us here, and you can see that's the flag of is that the YPG flag?
YPG International. It's our flag. We designed it.
Yep. So international. So how did people recruit? Is it something that people just did self-deployed? They just tried to reach out via and social media, or go there and literally try to get on the ground and get involved? And what was your experience with how people came to join this effort?
Well, when I joined, it was pretty much there was no system for it. I was one of the first who got there. So when I went to Kobani, I watched on screen Jordan Madsen and another 4 or 5 volunteers who were on the other side of Syria, and I thought they were in Kobani. When I arrived, I found out I was the only internationalist there, short of some Turkish internationalists who were from those communist Turkish parties who are illegal in Turkey on terrorist lists. But short of that, I didn't find anyone until later on. I found there was an American Jew there also, and some others were like half Kurds, so not really internationalists, but they were living in the West and they came there. But after later on, they set up an academy, international academy, because like foreign volunteers started to, show up more and more and request to join more and more. They would just write emails to the account of YPG International. They had a website, and then you had a big influx, and you had all kinds of people coming over, ideologically aligned, complete fascists. You had adventurists, many adventurers showed up really. And then when the numbers increased later on in 2016, you had a big influx of ideological volunteers, people who were ideologically aligned with the autonomous cause, which is very close to anarchy, but it's really socialist, it's not anarchist. But don't tell that to anarchists, they will not believe you. They will argue with you incessantly. At any rate, you had also, it's sad to say, but you had a proportionate increase in volunteers intake and requests as the airstrikes intensified. Because when I went there, airstrikes were very little. You could not call airstrikes to begin with. So you would hope for them not to hit you, because that sometimes they hit our positions. And we didn't have a real systematic way to coordinate with the international coalition. That changed significantly in Raqqa, where we would be able to do that more efficiently. And they did most of the job. On this point, there are a lot of noises around, especially coming from the US establishment, where they say, oh yeah, well, Trump said it. The Kurds are very good at fighting when they have airstrikes. Without airstrikes, they're not so good, yeah? And he launched a jab at them. I must say that that's a real problem that I addressed with commanders during Raqqa. The Kurds were very good at fighting without airstrikes before the international community showed up. Then they became over-reliant on them. And that's a direct consequence of the help they received. Because until the US showed up, the Kurds there, they were fighting against ISIS, they were fighting against al-Nusra, Sinjar, they were fighting all over the place, and they were holding their enclaves. It's not like they've been overwhelmed. So yeah, that's a reality that we had to deal with during the Raqqa offensive.
And if you can just explain to people who might be a little confused, there's a lot of different acronyms when it comes to Kurdish forces. So you've got, if you can, in as simple as possible, I know it can get complicated, but the difference between the PKK, the YPG, the PYD, and most importantly, the SDF. Who were the SDF, apparently attached to the U.S. military more directly, but the difference between those four abbreviations, if you could, Karim.
Well, people, I don't know if they know, but the PKK was born during the big crackdown that happened in the 70s, 80s on everything that was democracy and everything that was socialist in Turkey. There was like a big golpe by the military, and they cracked down on all these revolutionaries, so to speak, and put them all into jail. Öcalan at that time was smart enough to be outside of Turkey, and he founded the PKK party he was in Lebanon, where a lot of Kurdish refugees were living. And thanks to the big help that he received from the Palestinian resistance, he was able to bring in militants from Turkey, Kurds from Turkey, and all over Kurdistan. which is divided in 4 parts: Syria, Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. And he would bring them on and train them with the help of these Palestinian Liberation Front. And at the beginning, it was just one party, and then there were so many Kurds that they filled up all training camps from all factions, even Iranian factions. Like every faction at that time from the Palestinian resistance that had a training camp had PKK Kurds training there, and that's where they learned guerrilla tactics. That's where they learned everything they know today, and that what actually allowed them to put their leg up in terms of because there were many different revolutionary groups in Turkey, like Marxist, Leninist. They were Marxist, Leninist too, by the way, but that gave them a leg up. And from there, a lot of things happened. He was captured in the 90s, and they changed completely from Marxist-Leninists to autonomists, taking from Moray Bookchin, becoming less, more ecological. They took a completely different route. Now they're not Marxist-Leninists at all. They have some, they still feel they're socialists, so they feel that their ideology is socialist. They're anti-state, though. At the beginning, when they were Marxist-Leninists, they were fighting for communist state, a Kurdish communist state, and then they abandoned nationalism altogether. And that's actually what made them split up from even the Kurdish faction that liked them a little bit because they were nationalists. Now they see those Kurdish factions, the nationalist one, they see them as much as an enemy as Erdogan or other nationalist groups. So they're completely against nationalism in that sense. They built, during that time, they kind of taken the playbook of Maoists. And the Maoists, they have this ideology, which is, this strategy of splinting up. Not only having an armed resistant group, but having a political party and having, because they call it popular revolution fundamentally. And that's what the PKK has done. They have split up. They have created an umbrella group that is above the PKK, which is called the KJK. And the KJK unites under it ideologically all kind of groups. So the YPG, the PKK, the HDP in Turkey, but it's not a structural organization that gives orders. It's just an ideological one that allows a synthesis of all these groups and try to give an ideological background. Because then the HDP in Turkey, for example, is a legitimate political party with which has won a lot of seats in mayorships, and they have seats in the parliament, in the Turkish parliament. The PYD had and still has, I think, seats in the Syrian parliament, like the PYD. Like you have Saleh Muslim. Saleh Muslim has founded another party too, but the Saleh Muslim has always had a seat in the Assad parliament, even during the Syrian civil war. So they branch up, ideological, cultural, political, and they don't confine themselves in the field of armed struggle, and that's it, like Hamas or other groups. So the ideological framework doesn't come from the YPG. You will never see the YPG coming out with a communique or an analysis per se. They would never do that. You would never read a Maslum Abdi interview in which he gives a breakdown, an analysis of what's happening in Syria, for example, from an ideological or bigger frame point of view. The KJK does that all the time. And the KJK, funnily enough, has always been consistent in being anti-Zionist and criticizing very heavily the war in Gaza, which they call genocidal, which they define a war that targets not excessively, for the main part, women and children. So it's funny because you hear a lot of chatter. The YPG might even seem sometimes to be a tool of hegemony that Israel tried to use. or the United States try to use. But then you see the KJK leaders who are very critical of the United States, of the United States imperialism. And that's why the three main leaders have bounties on their head. The three main leaders of the KJK have higher bounties on their head than Jolani had on his own.
So that's you're talking about the Kurdish organizations in Turkey and northeastern Syria, but in Iraqi Kurdistan is slightly different. It's radically different, actually, and Israel is very much aligned and active in Iraqi Kurdistan on intelligence and a military level. Yeah. So just explain that difference.
Yeah, because in Iraq you have, it's the only state where they don't the KJK doesn't have an extension, because they have it in Iran, which is the PJAK. They have it in Syria, which is the YPG. They have it in Turkey, which is the PKK. But they don't have it in Iraq. Why? Because one of the conditions the Americans have placed for the creation of the KRG was the expulsion of the PKK from Iraq. They didn't want any meddling from the PKK. So in Iraq, you have two families, two clans, basically, or agglomerates of clans, Kurdish clans, which are dividing themselves the influence. They're pretty much split 50%. And they went to war with each other in the back in the time. With, I think, 15,000 casualties. Like, they really went at it when they fought each other. And one is Talabani and one is Barzani, the two main families. And they really act like mafia, like the way they control the land, the way they exploit the people, the way they give contracts, the way they sell the oil, everything about their policy, it's mafia-like. It's a mob family. And they've been dumb as hell, ultra-Zionists, and they didn't get anything for it, honestly. When they tried to call for the referendum of independence, that was Barzani, the PKK condemned it. Before that happened, he said, don't do it. We're against it anyway, but don't do it. Talabani was against it too. And Erdogan told them, go ahead, buddy, I'll back you up. Israel said the same. And when he called for the independence referendum, I know because I was there stuck. I was trying to leave Iraq at that time. And I was stuck because Iraq seized all the airports, grounded all the airplanes, and sent their Shia militia to take over Kirkuk's oil fields, which were supposed to be part of these independent Kurdish state that Barzani was trying to achieve. Israel didn't do nothing. Like when that happened, Israel told them, "Oh, we support you. We support the state." They didn't even recognize it, mind you. They just supported it in rhetoric. And the Shia came there and they just like stomped over the Peshmergas, and they just like in 3 days they took over everything. And Erdogan actually went against them. He condemned the thing, even though before he approved it, and you can find it in newspapers, like it's public. So very dumb. He lost the oil field, which he controlled until then. And those are the oil fields that have supplied Israel with oil from the Kurdish regions. But since that referendum failed, that oil is completely under the control of the Iraqi authority, and not one drop of oil has reached Israel since 2017, because the entire overwatch and oversight over it is in the hands of the Iraqi authorities.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Iran didn't recognize them as a state. Turkey didn't recognize them. Syria didn't recognize them. And Baghdad, of course, didn't recognize them. So in international law, that is like 0 for 5. There's no state, basically. Good luck.
And they lost the fight in 3 days. Like, can you hold them more than 3 days, at least to get some international condemnation? Like, you lose in 3 days all your oil fields. And here's the funny part. They were overpaying foreign mercenaries, like American mercenaries. And I met them in the airport in Baghdad, because we had to go to Baghdad to board the plane. The planes were all grounded, in Suleimania and Erbil, which are the two airports in the KRG region. And there were these GI Joes, like like Rambos, like completely bulked up, and it looked like they've been doing weight the whole time they were there, and they were paid a crazy amount of money to defend those oil fields. As soon as they saw the Shia militia, and they knew there were no air cover, because of course the Americans didn't help them either because they were against it, they just like cut tail and ran. And there you have it, like all these mercenaries, ex-special forces and stuff like that. They just for months, years took money from these Kurds who looked at the white savior as someone who can actually protect them. And mind you, one of them was paid the same as 50 Peshmergas. So one of those mercenaries bulked up, who has done steroids and lift weight for all the time he was there, one of them counted for 50 Peshmergas a paycheck. And they just ran away. It's funny because I met them at the Baghdad airport, and they were talking about this, oh, these Shia men, when we knew we didn't have air cover, we're not gonna try to engage with them, without that component. So they just like ran as fast as they could.
Yeah, about $1,500 a day in some cases.
Yeah. And the Peshmergas were getting paid like at that time, you would not believe it, they were getting paid $80 a month.
A month, yeah. Yeah, higher than a Syrian military, or about the same as a Syrian Arab army soldier as well. Yeah, the economics are just so distorted when you bring in the big American mercenary firms paid by extracted oil money, no doubt. So that's good that you kind of delineated some of the differences there, Karim, and also the SDF. Were you attached or around the SDF, or did the U.S. consider you SDF, your groups, or was that a completely separate group of Kurdish fighters in northeastern Syria?
Yeah, the SDF is the same. The YPG officially dissolved into SDF, and officially they remained as a core unit within
in 2017 or 18.
Yeah, around that time. The YPJ, which is the female unit, never dissolved officially because they didn't care about that bullshit. Because the Americans came out with that name, they were like, "Oh, you know what you can call yourself to appease the American public? You can go with Syrian Democratic Forces, and there is democracy in it." And the Kurds were like, "Yeah, well, whatever makes you happy, man." And they were like, and the American thought he was a genius, and the Kurd thought he was dumb as hell. But they didn't want to just tell that American general that he was a moron. And they changed the name, which is moronic in my opinion, because it didn't take them off one bit from the Turkish terrorist list. And the only thing that happened is that they lost prestige, because people remember the YPG liberating Kobani and that heroic resistance. And then you get these SDF, which is a name that looks very corporate, very retarded in my opinion. And they went with it, and they're still going with it. But it allowed them, on the other hand, to bring in the Arabs, because a big, like now, I think 60% of the SDF are Arabs and not Kurds. And QSD, which is the literal translation of the acronym in Kurd, in Arabic, it goes very well with the Arabs. It gives them an identification that they can understand. If YPG stands for Yekeneye Parstanagel, which is a Kurdish name, People's Protection Unit, and it would not have resonated with the Arab population as much, not even a little bit. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that. But when the Americans came up with it, they didn't think about that. They just thought democracy would be in it, and that it would sound nice to the American audience, news outlets, and stuff like that.
So they needed the Americans needed to have a local partner. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to have a military presence in Deir ez-Zor, and to occupy the oil fields, and to have different military establishments and operate in Syria. They needed to have a local partner, so the SDF was created to kind of legitimize the American military presence in there from 2017 onwards. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely. And to answer your previous question about the way Americans treated me, they hated my guts. Like they couldn't understand how a foreign national would be sitting in the Council of Generals. And when I had a waiver that allowed me to go through any checkpoints unchecked. I was the only one with that waiver. So I had three Toyotas full of soldiers, and I would go through American checkpoints and show them the waiver. And they didn't like it because my guys all carried phones. They were filming, taking pictures, and they just didn't want to be. It's not even a security thing. They just didn't want someone who could challenge their narrative about their role there, and because they were literally taking credit where there was no reason for them to take credit. Like they were saying, we've done that, and actually the Kurds lost like 100 people to do it, and Americans would just come over and say, you know, we did it ourselves. And plus, they always had these back mind thing, this thing in the back of their mind, strategically, in which they saw the Kurds only as a strategic tactical partner. They never ever acknowledge the political project, which, by the way, since its implementation to now, has never there has never been a bloodshed in terms of sectarian wars or our community being displaced. That has never happened. What happened in the Syrian coastline for years has never happened in the northeastern area. One time they tried to call for elections and the Americans stopped them. They didn't allow them to call elections because that would have somehow needed, somehow they would have needed to comment on it. And at the same time, while they were using the SDF as a tactical partner to defeat ISIS, because for the US, the partnership with NATO ally Turkey has always had the precedence, and Turkey sees the Kurds there, the SDF, as a existential threat to their, you know, sovereignty, whatever. At the same time, they kept providing support and help to the jihadist rebels in Idlib and on those all other areas like Jolani, for example. They never stopped providing help to those jihadists, and they were providing help to them before they started helping the Kurds. And when they started helping the Kurds, they continued. The only reason why they started helping the Kurds is because the other jihadists were completely ineffective against ISIS. They would not fight them other than small skirmishes. So they needed to rein in ISIS in Syria because they upsetted a lot of the Americans' ambitions in Iraq. They took over Mosul. They didn't expect that. The mess with the Sinjar, the genocide of the Yazidis, the attacks all over Europe, the United States didn't expect a group to come up that strong and upset their regional ambitions. So that's the only reason why they supported the YPG, which you can see it today as what's been happening.
Well, there's also the conversation's a lot more complicated. We probably don't have time to delve into it, but the foundations of ISIS, including Jolani's involvement in ISIS as well, and also U.S. Gulf-backed intelligence and money. There is a major overlap there, kind of very complicated. Suffice to say, there is a kind of, I think, invisible hand steering events in the emergence.
Not complicated, really. They created them, armed them, financed them. They would not be here without American intervention.
They were launched, effectively given birth. In much the same way as the Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen, very similar blueprint, but more direct support, as you said, with Al-Nusra Front, which became HTS, and all these other Jaish al-Islam and Ahrar al-Sham, and this bevy of different, Al-Qaeda kind of in Syria factions.
They were competing with each other, though.
Yeah. More direct support. Whereas the ISIS, it was, I think, more opaque. And ISIS had a level of autonomy and activity that I think, an organization. So, I mean, it's a separate study really looking at that. But back to Syria. So this is a good, as you mentioned, Al-Jolani is now the so-called self-appointed president of Syria as of December in the late December 2024. They march in to Damascus, and the sum of all fears is realized at this point. And so we'll bring you and bring everyone to this point in history now. And just a few weeks ago, Karim, when I saw this scene, I'm sure that you and many others were. I knew it was possible that this could happen, but I just, in the back of my mind, Karim, I thought that maybe somebody would brief the president that's probably not a good idea to have this photo op with the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, the former deputy of al-Baghdadi. His name is Mohammed Abdullah al-Jolani, Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, now Ahmed al-Sharaa, supposedly is his latest name. Saudi-born, claims to be Syrian. He's there basically being legitimized by the president of the United States, who had a lot of good things to say about him. I mean, he was asked more than once, and he doubled down on his comments. We'll bring Donald Trump here. Listen to this. When asked about what he thought about this new Syrian leader, here he is.
I met the leader. I met the new leader, and handsome guy, by the way. Young, handsome. And I said, you have quite a past. You've got a tough past. But when you think about it, are you going to put a choir boy in that position? I don't think so. It's going to be a little bit tough. It's a tough part of the world. So you're willing to give him a shot? The word they say, it's a nasty neighborhood. It's a rough neighborhood. Yeah. And I thought he was really, I thought he was terrific. He was so thankful about the sanctions because he knew he's not going to be able to bust through. So maybe it'll be a turn there. We'll see. I think he has a real chance. He's a strong guy.
I mean, I'll hand it over to you, Karim. I personally, I really, speechless is really where I'm at, but go ahead.
Well, the writing was on the wall. At any rate, Bond Spears, it is not the first time he backstabbed the Kurds in the back. He has already done it in 2019 when he pulled all the troops. That German internationalist from my battalion, dear friend of mine I talked to you about, he was killed because of that Trump withdrawal. And then he stopped it in 2019. The Congress revolted against him. The generals revolted against him. He had to backtrack on it. And now he's basically doing the same thing. He's choosing Qatar. He's choosing Turkey. He's choosing Jolani. And it's interesting that he would say he's not a choir boy. That's very telling, in my opinion, because his hands, you may not see it in the pictures, but are dripping with the blood of thousands of Alawite, which he has just called for the massacres a few months back in March. And that was the bloodiest massacre since the start of the Syrian civil war, and has happened under his watch, carried by his men in the Syrian coastline. And you had one of the most Black Mirror things that I have ever seen. You had the EU Council main Twitter account supporting these massacres, this genocide, as was characterized by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. And in 48 hours, they have killed 1,500 people. If you look at the area, it's a very small area. They burned villages to the ground, shot children and women in the face in their living room, kicking doors in. And the EU Council Twitter account said, we support the Syrian government, which means Jolani, against the provocation of the Assad remnants. And the social media was getting flooded with videos and images recorded by the perpetrators of these massacres themselves, which were self-documenting their war crimes. And it was atrocious to me because I was speaking with friends who are Alawites from the area, who were desperate, scared, terrorized. Many ran inside the Hamim air base that was still in that area, the Russian airbase. They ran there, and they're still there. There is a refugee camp in that base because the Alawites don't feel safe going back home. And you had the entire global north, the entire EU Council, ICC, all these holier than thou institutions who were endorsing the massacre as it was happening. Trump going there and shaking his hand and making the comment about the choir boy sends a very strong message. Yeah, that's one of the most atrocious videos I've seen. Like, that's a mother, and those dead on the floor, those are her children. And she's standing up to the jihadists who just killed her children, and they were telling her, you're not allowed to bury them. They have to stay under the sun. And I don't know if you know this, it's very creepy, but if the body stays under the sun, it becomes black. It immediately, it's not like movies, it becomes rotten, zombie-like. And to say that to a mother, which has all her children dead in front of her, and they were unarmed. As you can see, they don't have a shirt because they had them take off the shirt to see if they had weapons hidden. They didn't have them, obviously, and they shot them point blank and killed them. And that has happened at a rate which is thousands in 48 hours. So Trump sends a message to the rest of Syria and to the world, along with the EU Council, along with the ICC, Amir Khan. And what they're saying is, Karim Khan, sorry, what they're saying is, we know that these guys are jihadists because I had EU Council members talk to me and tell me in private, we know these guys going to do massacres, but we expect it. It's inevitable. In their minds, it's inevitable. But they are trying to let foreign investments in. They're privatizing, and they're letting us basically rob Syria blind, extract Syria's resources. And as long as the capital market is allowed to do whatever it wants in Syria, and buy it for cheap, because now there is a big auction happening on Syria. You know, it's on its knees. The economy is ruined. The country is destroyed. And all these vultures are circling and trying to break deals and strong-arm Jolani, who is happy to, you know, sell pieces off of Syria as long as they allow him to do whatever he wants. And unfortunately, this is just a prelude of what's going to happen in the future, because I believe we are a long time from seeing the last bullet shot and the massacre take place.
Yeah, and listen, you know, it's so funny that for 12 or 15 years, the Western chorus of the media was Assad the butcher, Assad must go, we must bring down the government of Syria, and the rebels need to liberate the country. And so this is the liberation, which is a sectarian bloodbath. And it's not as if we didn't see it coming, Karim. Many of us were warning about this from 2011. We knew, we heard the chants, you know, Christians to Beirut, Alawites to the grave. We heard those chants in Banyas and other places as early as 2011. So it already was taking on that sort of a shape, and that was being encouraged by the Americans, encouraged by the British, encouraged by the Turks. So the same, and of course the Israelis, quietly have been supporting this destabilization of Syria. But it's so funny that when they put sanctions on Syria, which are crippling sanctions designed to strangle the country, they said it's because of the Assad regime. It needs to be on because of the government. And now they're saying the same people who were imposing those sanctions for all those years, they're saying, well, they need to be lifted because it's hurting the people. So suddenly it's not about the leadership, it's about the people. So the hypocrisy, especially from the West, shouldn't shock anybody. But nonetheless, Karim, you being from a European country, the EU has played a direct role in the strangulation of Syria. Together with the US, they did a double, a vice grip, if you will, unprecedented strangulation intended to punish the country, the people. It's incredible. So it's time has shown what hypocrisy this is, but now what is the state of Syria, Karim? What is the current state, the current situation in the country? How bad is it?
It's very bad. And it's gotten worse since Jolani took over. From even an economic standpoint, imagine that Assad had, for his faults, had bakeries which were all over the place, even in Raqqa, where ISIS was, or in the northeastern Syria. He had bakeries, and he kept subsidizing those bakeries with state funds. So nobody would go hungry. And that happened even before the Syrian civil war. But he kept doing it. He kept paying for paychecks of essential workers, like in dams or electric factories and all those essential infrastructures that, like communication, antennas. That's a funny thing. People don't know that. ISIS had antennas from Syrian Telecom, and workers that were getting their paychecks from the Assad regime. Like the guy with the paycheck would reach them inside ISIS territory, in the core of ISIS territory, to pay those workers, and ISIS would not blink because they knew they needed the antennas to work for themselves too, other than for the people. So those are aspects of the Ba'athist socialist state that Assad had kept going on, with all its faults. The day after Jolani took over, that was over with. And it's interesting because for me, the turning point when I understood, okay, it's over. For the Kurds, it's over. For everyone, they're going to give it to him, was when Tony Blair he's appointed foreign minister, which is also a long-standing member of Al-Qaeda. There are pictures of him in fatigue and Kalashnikov in hand. When he invited him to Davos and gave him that interview, which looked even more embarrassing than Trump calling handsome jihadi Jolani, because they laughed, the humor was very light, and he gave him softball after softball question. And they were like two friends who finally met each other after 10 years. And in that interview, Shibani, Assad, not Assad, which is he has a name that's very similar, said, we're gonna privatize and we're gonna open our markets for foreign investments, because that's something we need to take Syria back. And that was the key question, because when he said that, you could see Tony Blair smile from ear to ear, and that was the magic word, privatization. And you transform your Hilux Honda with a Dodge mounted on back into a private jet. You transform your military fatigue into a very nice tailored suit of $20,000, like Rolex watch or Philippe Patek, whatever. And you get to join the dream of the neoliberal world. And that was when everything changed. The day after Jolani took over, the prices of bread in Syria doubled, and the size of bread diminished half its size. I'm not even joking. Like the day after, he took all the subsidies out, sent them God knows where, because those subsidies were there. He had the money for the subsidies because Assad had them. He took over the bank. All the subsidies were gone. The price of the bread doubled in a country where 85% of the people are living under poverty line, where people can't afford bread, even people who work, even people who were in the military couldn't afford bread for themselves and their families, where IDPs are still by the hundreds of thousands living in camps, where you have cholera, all kinds of diseases, child mortality to the roof, no job whatsoever, infrastructure is completely destroyed, and a humongous debt that the country incurred thanks to all the sanctions and the cutoff from the foreign market. So he's taken over a country, and now he's privatizing and the people already don't have bread, and the level of misery is going up on a level of magnitude.
Yeah, yeah, and so the currency, of course, still in free fall. That's by design. Economy was attacked very early on in 2010 and 2011, and the attack kept going. And this is a formula that's been deployed against Venezuela, many other countries. It's very well known economic warfare, not even counting sanctions, just attacking the currency and the balance of payments, the gold reserves, emptying all that out. And so Turkey's even actually been hit with a little taster of that as well from the West. But so that's the situation. I think you've identified it pretty well. This regime is how he calls himself a president. This guy is unbelievable because he has no parliament, and there's been no plebiscite. There's been no even demand to have elections, which is normally standard whenever there's a coup. And the U.S. and Britain would go in, when is the schedule for the elections? Is it September? And they help to prepare them. They bring in their sort of OECD, CE, and all these organizations to come and help organize the elections. None of that. Jolani just said, maybe in 4 or 5 years. We're not really bothered about this democracy thing, but I'm the president. So it's just.
But they started saying first 1 month, and then we're gonna bring everyone together and write a constitution, and then they said 3 months. We just need, to check the files, and then they said 5 years. And I guess when the 5-year marks get closer, they're gonna say something else. I have this feeling.
That was one of the basis for selling the sanctions package against the Assad government. Is he's not rewriting the constitution. He's not doing the reforms that we demand. And then this guy comes in and basically he takes it to a whole nother level of tyranny, and they're lifting sanctions. So it's like there's no consistency at all. But what's more dangerous, I think, is this legitimization of the West coming in to shake hands, to court an international terrorist, and not just any international terrorist, one of the top international terrorists, a real killer. They were doing street executions in Idlib when they were running their little Islamic state there. And funny enough, Trump is the one that helped to basically undermine the counteroffensive in Idlib. And Trump even bragged about it publicly at a rally. He said, I saved Idlib, and the people in Idlib, they love me. I say he saved 35,000 terrorists. So this coup would not have happened, or the fall of Damascus would not have happened, if not for Trump in 2018, and Erdogan as well. So that brings us to another question here. And firstly, Karim, what is the potential right now for a civil war? We saw Marco Rubio telegraphing this idea. He's obviously let some cat out of the bag. He said Syria could descend into a bloody civil war in a matter of weeks. He said a few weeks ago. So obviously he's been fed something by U.S. Intelligence there. I personally think that's on the cards. And the U.S. wants to stay there. That's number one priority. Israel wants what it wants, but we'll get to what all these actors want around Syria. But tell me about the potential for sectarian fighting right now and the possible breakup of Syria, a bloody civil war. Is that a major risk right now?
Yes, it is. If you think about it, Trump went there guns blazing, but he didn't consult any Kurds. No Kurds were there with him. And since he took over office, he never mentioned the SDF or the Kurds. It's like they don't exist. Like if you listen to Trump, his comms or the people close to him, it's like the SDF or the northeastern Syria, it's no place whatsoever. It's like it doesn't exist. You will not find it in any of their transcripts, not even mentioned. So he went there and he told Jolani, I believe that the reason why, and I wrote it in a tweet, in a thread, which has been quoted by some relevant newspapers recently, some legacy newspapers. I noticed that the company that has bought the port of Latakia for 30 years is actually a Chinese front. Like, it's a French company on paper, but actually it's a Chinese front. And there is a lot of documentation proving it. And so China moved in while Trump was was trying to strong arm Jolani. And then, he ran for the fences. He couldn't allow, like, his whole thing is that he wanted to leave the Middle East to focus on China. And then China sweeps in the Middle East and takes over one of the key nodes of trades in the entire Mediterranean. That's the most important port. Like, the other port, Russia's still there, by the way, and the other port, China takes it over. The port has exclusive rights for China. The China does whatever it wants with that port. It's like it's a part of Chinese land. And the agreement says that they're gonna split the revenue. 60 goes to Syria, 40 goes to China, but China doesn't really care about the revenue. They're full of ports around there. They'll have it in Lebanon, they have it in Greece, they have it in Europe, in Marseille. What they care about is having a base there and having control, surveillance, and it allows them to project their influence in the entire region, especially the Middle East. They didn't have a port in that place. So Trump noticed. Probably they didn't publicize it because China never brags about their victories, and Trump didn't wanna let people know that he's a moron. So he ran for the fences, and that explains all that very boyfriend-girlfriend talks. That, like, it's not normal that you meet a jihadist overlord and call him handsome man and use all those kind of attributes that he has given him. Not a Boy Scout and all that. But what he promised him in exchange for joining the Abraham Accord and normalizing with Israel was, I'm going to give you the 9,000 ISIS prisoners currently held by the SDF in Hasakeh, in the Gurwana prison. And that's a big no-no for the SDF. They haven't lost 12,000 of their youth, because that's the price for fighting ISIS, 12,000 of your best young men that have died since 2014 in a 10-year span in a very small region. Like, people think northeastern Syria is, I don't know, it's smaller than New York in terms of population. It's very depopulated sliver of land. There are not many people there. Losing that much of your youth, mostly Kurdish, it's a big blow for the Kurds there and for the people. So giving 9,000 of hardcore ISIS fighters back to Jolani, it's a suicide for them. Like, we're going to give you these 9,000 hardcore fighters, the best fighters of ISIS, those who survived. Among them, there is probably the real caliph of ISIS, because you have all these media, probably ran by Langley at this point, which are portraying messaging from ISIS, and it's like ISIS still exists. But really, if you look at it, ISIS now, it's mainly African. Like, there is an African group which is very active in Africa, and they are the main group, which is they got the main, they're ISIS main now, let's say. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a leadership still in place, which is confined among those 9,000 fighters, which is the majority of ISIS combatants, the majority of ISIS ideologues. They're all there. Once Jolani liberates them, these guys will all swear allegiance to Jolani. Either they swear allegiance to Jolani, or they get to see all their wives marrying Al-Qaeda people under Jolani command, because their wives are held in a separate camp, which is a concentration camp, Al-Hol, and there are around 40,000 women and children there. It's a tragedy what has happened with that camp. I fought with so many people, argued so many people that we should not have any part in it, because that's the new Camp Bucca. That's where they're trying to grow the new generation of jihadist extremists.
Yep.
And those children growing there will be 100% ISIS extremists, and you give them no other choice. Like, you literally made them, and if they come and they shoot me, I'll say, I deserve it. I put you in there. Like, that bullet, it's a revenge that I deserve, because you didn't deserve that. No child does. And giving back those to Al-Jolani would mean that Al-Jolani will have an unstoppable army, will have ISIS under his umbrella. And even like now we are in a situation where the Kurds, the SDF, can put up a fight if the Turks don't intervene. And they might very well not intervene, because there are like peace talks going on with PKK, which has dissolved and all that. Without Turkish intervention, they have a chance. If they free those 9,000 hardcore fighters, they have no chance. Because those 9,000, they might be a bit, rusty, since they've been sitting in jail for like almost 10 years. But I can assure you, they could be very well better than the entire army Jolani has right now.
Yep. And also, the magical reappearance of ISIS in Syria will guarantee U.S. stays and bulks up their presence, expands their presence, not just in Syria, in Iraq. And isn't that what Washington has been looking for, is some kind of a card to reestablish their footing, or legitimacy of their footing there, because the Iraqis didn't want them. The new Iraqi parliaments three times publicly kicked them out. The U.S. said, we're not leaving. I don't personally think anybody in Syria, other than Jolani, who's friendly with America at the moment, wants them there. But that's what the U.S. wants, because that's what Israel wants. Israel needs the U.S. there for other reasons, broader strategic reasons, to do probably with an attack on Iran, among other things. And that brings us to the next point, Karim. What is the agenda? And we'll go down one by one. Let's start with Israel. Let's start with America, and let's look at Turkey. In the Gulf, Qatar, Saudi Arabia is clearly interested now, as they've always have been. But starting with Israel, and then we'll move to the Americans, then to the Turks. What is the agenda for Syria, as you see it?
Well, Israel has been for a long time trying to use the Kurds in Syria as a card, but they always, if you remember a few months ago, there was a lot of comms coming from the foreign ministry of Israel, Netanyahu himself, trying to tend a hand to the Kurds, and you never seen anything coming back. The only thing you could have seen is Masloum Abdi in an interview saying, we accept help from everyone, but he didn't want to even say Israel, because people don't understand it. It's so deep, the relationship they have with the Palestinian resistance. The HDP in Turkey, which is the political party part of the KJK, that has seats in the parliament. In 2019, if I'm not mistaken, Leila Khalid from PLFP, the PLFP leader, went there and she spoke from the podium of the HDP to hundreds of Kurds who were there. She showed solidarity, and that's not an easy thing to do for a Palestinian, because they count on the Turkish support. And for the PLFP to go there, to the main spokeswoman in this case of the PLFP, to go there and take a stand in that moment during the election, by the way, with the Kurds, was like a big political move that had some very deep repercussions that we're not going to go over. But it was not a good thing for the PLFP. They had a lot of criticism from Hamas because of that. And you have also pictures of the previous leader of Hamas, which has been assassinated with the leader, with Salahatin Demirtas, which is the leader of the HDP, now jailed by Erdogan. And you have letters that Salahatin Demirtas wrote. Like, there are a lot of communications out there. Like, the relationship is strong, is an old relationship, has deep roots. On the other hand, Israel has tried to play them anyway. as a card because of their reliance on American support. And the Americans are there. They didn't retreat in 2019 because the Congress revolted against Trump when he tried to pull out all the troops as soon as he took office. After a phone call with Erdogan, nobody knew that he had that in his mind, not even his generals. He just told them point blank, let's go. The reason he stopped, it isn't because the Kurds have a lobby, and it isn't because the Congress found a conscience. The American Congress has no conscience. They're all bought and paid for by AIPAC. The reason is because the Kurdish lobby stopped American retreat in 2019. The Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby, stopped American retreat. And the Kurds are aware of that. So they tried until the last moment to take the Kurds and try to reassure them that we're going to give you the guarantees that you need to go against Turkey, to go against Jolani. But Öcalan's letter came out, the one that brought the dissolution of the PKK. And in that letter, it said very clearly that the Kurds had to find a settlement within the nation where they were hosted. So in Turkey, they had to find it with the Turkish government. In Syria, they had to find it with the Syrian government, even though the Syrian government is led by Ahmed al-Sharaa, aka Jolani. The Kurds decided, and it's a very, I'm against it. I don't support that decision. I don't think they should have went, Mazloum Abdi should have went and shook hands with Ahmed al-Sharaa, aka Jolani, on the eve of, while the Syrian coastline massacre was taking place of the Alawite. Actually, he rescued him somehow, because when he went there to shake his hands, he saved the EU conference that took place 10 days after that, where the EU unlocked those 5 billion package for Syria and took off some of the sanctions. Jolani was supposed to go there himself, and he couldn't go after that massacre. He had to send his foreign minister. But if and here's the thing, those officials, the EU officials, von der Leyen, her right-hand woman, and all that, they spoke about their optimism thanks to that deal that Mazloum Abdi has done with Jolani. So that allowed them the political excuse to have Hayat Tahrir al-Sham militants coming to Europe and getting 5 billion euro, because they're saying, look, there is a historical, they called it a historical deal between the Syrian interim government, which they call right now, and the Syrian Democratic Forces. You see, they call them Syrian Democratic Forces. They didn't call it the Democratic Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria. They don't, even the EU don't recognize the political project. For them, they're just like a mercenary army with rifles fighting ISIS. That's all they are. They don't recognize the fact that it's a woman-led revolution. They don't recognize the autonomy project, the democratic project, the grassroots democracy. Nothing. It's only a militia that fights against ISIS, and that's where we want them to be. So Israel wants to see Syria weakened, but Israel needs, in my opinion, to have all its neighbor weakened. They have to have dictators, which are dictators that are US puppets. They need everyone around them to be weak. Because if the people, everywhere, if the people can, be them Jordanian, Egyptian, Syrian, or whatever, if the people can have a say, it's war with Israel. It's nothing short of that. It has never happened in the history of mankind that you have a minority being butchered, not even a minority, but a group of people being butchered, like the Palestinians in Gaza. We were seeing a genocide happening, and all around them you have people of the same ethnic group that speak the same language, of the same culture, of the same religion, doing nothing. Nothing. And that is unprecedented. Like, you have to have every country weak, every country dependent on foreign aid, every country scared of Israel and scared of the United States, with dictators in place that don't do the will of the people. and then you can have a chance of surviving. That's the only way the state of Israel can survive. And that's basically their policy all over the place. Going back to Turkey, Turkey has another ambition, which is the I call them the Neo-Ottoman Klepto Sultanate, because it's a Klepto Sultanate. It's not even a democracy anymore. They arrested the main Kemalist secular opposition, which has nothing to do with the Kurds, actually hates the Kurds historically. And they arrested, basically Erdogan arrested the opponent who was projected to beat him in the elections. He arrested them. And he arrested all kinds of, closed all kinds of newspapers. Turkey's a dictatorship in all but name. And their ambitions in Turkey is to basically go over their borders. Their idea is like to project their influence all over the ex-Ottoman enclaves and even go further. So that's their idea. They want to externalize war. But make no mistake, the Turkish economy is on its knees. Like if you look at the Turkish lira, it's terrible. So it's somehow the Turkish elite needs these expansion in war and victories, military victories, to deflect from their internal problems, because they have many.
And we'll go back to Turkey in a moment, Karim, but let's just look at this map here of the Golan Heights. And so Israel moved very quickly after the collapse of the Syrian Arab Army. The Assad government of Damascus took the Golan Heights, took Mount Hermon. These are strategically invaluable. It's very unlikely, in my estimation and others, that they'll ever give these back. You might eventually become an expansion of Israeli territory. Gives them firing range over Damascus, artillery range, southern Lebanon as well. Huge strategic advantage. So that was done without, firing a shot, really. I mean, they then took out the whole of the Syrian air defenses, the whole of the Syrian military. So Syria basically has no real defense. They've, like a matador, just waved the rag and allowed the bull to come right in. But that's not the end of it. But I mean, just what we're looking at here. I mean, this was not possible before December, because Syria would have put up a fight to defend. It was a stalemate, effectively, up to that point. And these two countries have been at war, or Syria and Israel, for many decades. And this has all changed. And so now the Israeli momentum is, are they going to stop here? Because I would think that I wouldn't stop if I was Israel. I'd keep going. What are your thoughts on this situation?
I think, honestly, the moment Trump shook hands with Jolani, Israel is behind that also. I don't believe Trump could have went against the Zionist lobby. I just don't believe that for a second. And that's why there was the Abraham Accord there. And that's why now we have talks between Israeli officials and officials that are men of Ahmed al-Sharaa, of Jolani. And those talks are ongoing. Jolani offered to join the Abraham Accord, offered normalization, offered to arrest and expel all pro-Palestinians and Palestinian factions that were hosted by Assad. So we have Palestinian groups within Syria. They already been arrested and expelled, by the way. So he is giving Israel all that Israel wants. Plus, he's has a very aggressive posture toward Lebanon, toward Hezbollah, and toward Iran. So I believe that when Trump went there and shook his hands, that was Israel making a play. And I believe that if Jolani were to sign the Abraham Accord and become basically the infantry of ISIS to be deployed against Iran, they may be okay with that. At the end of the day, those strategic positions are valuable, but they have no value in terms of economy. Like they withdraw from, they've taken the the basin, the water basin that confined with Jordan, and then they left it. That would have been important in terms of resource. But those mountain ranges that they have taken over, they don't have much in terms of value, in terms of resources. And I don't think they want to take the Druze with them. The Druze, for them, they were like just a bargaining chip, something to use, to give them an excuse to go in. I still believe it was the right thing that they went in and defended the Druze, because it would look like what happened in the Syrian coast could have happened next to them, and there was nobody to defend them. Let's remember, even the leader of the Alawite, during those days of genocide, of genocidal butchery, he called into Israel to help them. He called in everyone to help, anyone who could come there to rescue them, because when you're seeing children being butchered by the hundreds and women being shot in the face in their own homes, and the international community silent, and by the way, no newspaper was reporting on it either, even though the social media were being flooded by those images that you just saw, that you've just shown. Desperation kicks in, and anyone's game. So the Druze historically, they don't like much Israel, those who stay in Syria. Like historically they've been with Assad. But between being second-class citizens within Israel and being butchered, I think they would choose the first option. Having said that, if Jolani does everything that Israel wants him to do, I don't see them try to take a fight with him at the end. But in my opinion, Jolani is playing the long game, even against Israel. Like many people, that's where I disagree with many people. Many people say, Jolani is a Zionist prop. It's just there to do Israel's interests, American interests, and so on and so forth. But this guy has risen through the ranks of ISIS, and he wasn't the son of an emir. He was a young university students who have been arrested in Camp Bucca and put there with all the terrorists that allowed them to form ISIS, the modern ISIS, which has been born between in a merger of ex-Ba'athist officials, generals, and jihadists who didn't have the technical capability to build a state that the ex-Ba'athist officials from Assad had. And he rose through those ranks inside the Iraqi insurgency, and he didn't do it by making cupcakes. He did it by you have to be extremely violent, extremely ideological for them to allow you to rise through those ranks. It's extremely selective. There are so many that try to make it and they die along the way, they blow themselves up, they get targeted by airstrikes. He's been able to raise, or they get assassinated by the organization themselves when they go against the ideological framework or the orders or whatever. He rose through those ranks while having extreme sense of survival, like a cockroach. He survived American bounties, American airstrikes. He cut deal with whomever had to cut deal with in terms to make it out. And he decided to become moderate when he saw ISIS go up in flame. But until 2013, he was 100% aligned with ISIS. And after 2013, he was still allied with ISIS ideologically. He just had a disagreement on who should be the leader with al-Baghdadi. And Al-Qaeda took his side, and he became the main man of Al-Qaeda, and al-Baghdadi became a Khawarij, which basically for Al-Qaeda, al-Baghdadi was somehow a kuffar in some sense, outside of the religion. And he cut ties with Al-Qaeda again when he understood that the air was getting a bit dangerous, too much risk to be targeted by American airstrikes. And he started becoming the man of the United States, and they started helping him take out his competition in Idlib, Ahrar al-Sham, all these other factions who are still like sympathetic with Al-Qaeda. He fought them one by one, eliminated them one by one, a little bit like Cesare Borgia in that sense. He called meetings. There was this famous meeting he called everyone to make peace. He was fighting all these other factions, and he killed everyone in the room. or arrested everyone, or poisoned this guy, or assassinated this guy after telling him, we're cool, man. And there's just this guy was found dead, and he was like the leader of this other faction. So he's extremely intelligent, but I believe that the reason why he became moderate is because he became moderate in 2018. 2018 was the time where ISIS collapsed completely. The last city, Raqqa, was completely destroyed, taken over, and Boghuz, there was the big surrender of 40,000 ISIS military. That was the end of ISIS. And he understood, I cannot do like ISIS. I can't build an Islamic State, in my opinion. I cannot build an Islamic State and go against all these powers. I have to play the long game. I have to play the moderate. I have to say the things they want me to say. And he knows what the West wants. He wants money. He wants privatizations, wants liberal talk. And he has been doing all that. And he has been rewarded for it. Now he has a chance to build an army. And I believe if he doesn't get corrupted by money and power, and the nice cushy seat of a first-class airplane ticket to Saudi Arabia and partying with the Prince Ibn Salman, if all those things don't corrupt him, he will eventually launch the ultimate offensive. His name for the most of his adult life has been Al-Jolani, which means Golan Heights. His name was a note to liberate the Syrian land occupied by Israel. Until 2019, when he started playing the moderate, his speeches, in every speech, he talks about liberating Al-Aqsa. So it comes down to it. Either he's playing the moderate, and Israel, that's why Israel is a bit reticent still, and he will sign the Abraham Accord, do whatever he needs to do while building his Islamic army, which seems like he's doing, honestly. Or he really became moderate, and in that case, he will be assassinated within the year.
Well, it's pretty clear that one of his main sponsors, the person he could thank the most for his ascension and his survival, if you will, is someone we like to call Karim Abu Donald here on the program. There is no doubt about it. Abu Donald has been his greatest sponsor and asset. So isn't that something that he would take him under his wing like this for 2 terms now, the first term and the second term. So, I mean, we laugh about this, but there's not like a serious thread of truth in this as well. But before we go, Karim, because we've gone a little bit over time here, but it's such an important topic, and I really appreciate you, getting into the granular details of this. We just got a couple of minutes left, and tell us, because everybody wants to know what the situation with Turkey is. Does Turkey have territorial ambitions over parts of Syria? Is that the long game of the AKP New Turkey project led by Erdogan, but not for long? He probably is not going to be in politics much longer. He'll be resigned to the Godfather position. But what is Turkey's goal? What is their actual material end game? What do you think?
All right, so this is actually tied with Israel. So they want to pass a pipeline through Syria, and that pipeline would go from Syria and have Turkey as the main sponsor of it and go straight to Europe. That pipeline would cut off Israel from being the main, being supplier, being a key point. Like Israel has always played this role of trying to make itself essential, because essentially they are like a colonialist, a settler colonial outpost of the West in the Middle East. And they always try to keep themselves in that position to be useful to, tech, whatever. If this pipeline passes through Syria and then goes from Turkey to Europe, it would cut them completely off, and they want to have a piece of it. So in Syria, Turkey wants to project, like they want to take back in terms of influence Syria. They want Syria to be an extension of Turkish foreign policy. So all their trade deals, all that, they want Syria to do what the Turkish government say, and that's been the case so far. Like Jolani has tried to play the independent, but so far he has been directed pretty closely from Hakan Fidan, which is the current foreign minister of Turkey, has been the leader of MIT, which is the Turkish Secret Service, for the past 10 years. Everything that has happened in Syria since then had his fingerprints on it, false flags, you name it. And he knows intimately Jolani. So if they take over the economy of Syria and they can make these pipelines and have complete access to gas, oil, all the resources within Syria, exploration of water, because remember Turkey has that big problem of the AZZ, yeah, like with the Greek island taking over all the territorial water of Turkey, which Turkey contests. Having the possibility to access the Syrian national waters for gas exploration is a big thing. So there are a lot of resources and key strategic interests in terms of having Syria as a conduit for these pipelines that would be able to reach Europe and cut off somehow the reliance on Russia. And that has been basically the game so far, but it doesn't stop to Syria because Turkey wants to take back Iraq too, and they've been very active there also. So we will see what happens, but Turkey has always been doing the interest of Turkey. So even in their Iran stance, they don't really care about the Israeli ambitions on Iran, the problems with Iran. When Iran was sanctioned, Turkey has played the role of using their banks to launder all the money and allow Iran to bypass all those sanctions. That's why the Turkish president of bank has been indicted in the United States, and there are all that going on. So they want to extend their influence outward, mainly because the Turkish elite, there is a Turkish elite that has, we see it in Bayraktar, we see it in all these energy company, needs to expand outward. That's why they're building all those fleet for like blue water fleets, and it's all part of these neo-Ottoman klepto sultanate that wants to extend outward and make new deals. And yeah, like kudos for them. That's a very like the KJK, for example, have a lecture on this, and they look at the previous war, previous Iraqi-Iranian war, and that was, in terms of economy output, the golden age for Turkey, because they were able to leverage both countries, Iran and Iraq, and do deals with both of them. They couldn't trade among each other. So for the Turkish economy, it was like really booming because everything had to pass through them and they became the power center. That's what actually allowed them to have such a fast growth during that, because it happened during that time. So that's what they're looking at. They're looking at trying to leverage countries and become the middleman that makes money from both sides, basically.
Makes sense as well. And it probably, truth be known, the Turkish influence in Syria at the moment is probably one of the only things I think is keeping Russia somewhat secure in its very tenuous position there. Kudos to Russia for taking in so many Alawite refugees and housing, thousands of them on their air base when they wouldn't be receiving any protection outside of those walls. And it's a very, very difficult and very tenuous and complicated, very explosive situation in Syria. And we could get into other aspects of this as well, but I think I think it's a good introductory discussion, and perhaps we can reconvene again, Karim, and maybe focus on some more strategic discussions and maybe a little more geopolitics as well. But we really appreciate you coming on, sharing your background and experience, your unique experience with this particular part of the world, with Syria. And of course, you've got roots there in different ways, emotional roots, your own personal history, relationships, friendships with the community there, with the country. So I know it's in your interest. You want to see the best possible outcome for the people there. and you're very concerned about the regime that's in power, as many are in Damascus. So I think a lot of people can relate to your positions and your sympathies and your concerns on this. So, but Karim, let me bring up onto the screen your social media account, because it's a good sort of portal here. Well, hold on, we'll bring this up on screen. 1 second, we'll just bring that down and bring this back up here onto the screen. That is your X account, Karim Franceschi, and I see your books in Italian, not yet in English. I don't know if you translated any of them yet, but I know they're in Italian.
Yeah, they've been translated in Finnish, Turkish, a few other languages, but never in English.
Okay, well, that's something we can hopefully you can work on in the near future, so people can get a little more in-depth, granular look into things that you observed and experienced there during that really important time. So we got links to your social media in our show page as well. It'll take people directly there. And if you're in Italy, you've done quite a few interviews with the Italian media, Karim, as well on this topic. So we want to hopefully be able to hear more about this from you going forward. But thank you for joining us on the Sunday Wire this week.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Karim Franceschi. You can learn more and listen to what he's putting out from his X feed there. And again, we'll continue this conversation going forward. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Let's take a break, and we're going to go and pivot to Overdrive. And we've got a couple of our colleagues hopefully waiting in the wings to talk about some other important stories in the United States. There's quite a few things to cover as well. So we'll be doing that and more after the break. Stay with us. This is the Sunday Wire, live right across every channel conceivable. We'll see you in a second.
All of the pictures left unpainted, all of the games they left unplayed, all the laughter in the playground, all of the arts they never made. Ghost faces of a million Palestinian children. All of those voices left in silence, all with their names written in kind, lest their bodies pulled from rubble, lifeless empty dolls to find. Ghost faces of a million Palestinian children. What are the songs they've never written? What are the words they'll never sing? And the darkness of the nightmare, inescapable that rings. The ghost faces of a million Palestinian children. I hear the crying, helpless children, God's most precious and most dear. I hear them begging for the reason. How could you ever leave us here? I close the eyelids of a million Palestinian children. So what do we really stand for? Is this how our future's made? And when we ever find the courage to stand up unafraid, I tear away the persecution of the Palestinian children. Rise up and be the guardians of the Palestinian children. To respect our obligation, every creed and every nation, 'cause every soul deserves protection. Save the Palestinian children. Save the Palestinian children.